Hello, I'm Lucas, and I've done my hair up a little bit, and then it went crazy. This is a bit of lit, and I want to talk about this fantastic book by Miss Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway. I read it back in college. I'm just gonna hold it up because it's great and worth looking at, and probably better than this mess on my head. So, anyway, I read it back in college, and when I read it, I was not prepared to read a stream of consciousness kind of novel like this at all. Having now reread it, there's still definitely parts that I reread them as I was rereading, where I would just like lose who was thinking what and what was going on, which is my main problem with the book. But it just takes work to enjoy the book, and that's all I've got to say about that. To summarize a little bit of what this is, it's following Mrs. Clarissa Dalloway, who married Richard Dalloway, and she's gonna have a party, and this follows her day, or the day in the middle of the year of 1923, and it's just one day, 200 pages of beautiful, wonderful rendered characters and all their inner psychology exposed, touching on raw nerves. It's just crazy. There are two main through lines for these characters: Clarissa Dalloway, of course, and Septimus Smith, who is a war veteran for World War One, who is in deep trouble, just deep, deep trouble. He's married to a beautiful young Italian woman, Lucrezia, and she's concerned for him, and he's delusional, and he's hallucinating, and he's not very trusting of anybody, especially doctors, because the doctor he's gone to see was pretty dismissive and said everything's fine with him, nothing wrong. But when you read the parts that involve him, or even talk about him, like, because it gets so deep into the minds of all these characters and flows so freely among all their thoughts, when you get to him, you are, even when it's like kind of flowing between Lucrezia and Septimus, you're deeply, deeply concerned for what's gonna happen. I mean, he's constantly talking about, "I'll kill myself. We'll kill ourselves. And he's haunted by the past of his war buddy Evans, and time actually is very important in this because all the main characters think back to a time before Septimus when he was still at war. Clarissa and what's his name? I wrote it down. Oh yeah, Peter Walsh. I always want to say Richard Walsh, but Richard Dalloway is who she married, and he's sort of a failed politician. Her husband, not quite failed, but he's not reaching the heights he wanted to. But Peter Walsh and Clarissa, they sort of think back to their time together, especially when they meet. That scene is just amazing to read. Even if you haven't felt any of those emotions, I imagine that you would completely understand where any of that is coming from. It's just so raw, I guess. I don't know what I can't praise it enough. I don't know how to describe it. It's just so real. um, but like especially in that scene, you can see Peter Walsh and Clarissa Dalloway. They had a relationship back when Clarissa was a young woman, and Peter was a young man, and time is affecting them both. Clarissa is sort of accepting of her mortality, and we see that through some of her remarks of a lot of things and all of her thoughts. And Peter, meanwhile, he's not accepting of it. He's deeply afraid of it, and he needs order in his life, and that feels sort of chaotic to him. And uh, he he's been a lot more deeply affected by his failed marriage proposal to Clarissa back in the day. And he's still sort of clinging on to what little youth he has as a early mid 50s man. There's a part where he starts following a woman and having these weird, sad, pathetic delusions. And it's a little scary, but it's so, like, you get it, you know? Because Virginia Woolf is a fantastic writer. And yeah, I mean, time plays such a key factor, and most of this is like flashbacks, I think. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes because it just moves so freely from moment to moment, from thought to thought. And I mean, Big Ben constantly rings every half an hour, and you're always reminded of the sounds and then of the other bells that ring out. And yeah, I just I just wanted to praise this book and Virginia Woolf. I will be reading some of the other books that I bought of hers throughout the next few months. And yeah, if you've never read this, it's difficult to read. So be prepared for that. I wouldn't say it's hard to enjoy. Definitely the first time I read it, I didn't get it. I'll tell you what I remembered. I remembered it was about one day. It took one day. Clarissa went to get flowers. There was a crash of a car. People thought it was royalty. I remembered what happens to Septimus, like his final moment in the book. I remembered there was a party and her coming back, and this time, you know, I got so much more out of it. I mean, there's so many other scenes now that I'm a better reader that I can better enjoy. And I think there are still parts that fly over me because it, like, the thoughts just go all over the place. So, you know, I'll be rereading this book again one day because it's just, I'm super happy I read it. It's just a wonderful book, and you should all read it. Thank you. Goodbye.